Okay, hello. Welcome to this discussion about, I cannot believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but human composting. That's what we're going to discuss. Woo! Just so everyone knows ahead of time, there is an article linked in the description box that'll be where a lot of this discussion is taken from, and then it'll be my thoughts, and it'll be the thoughts of our dear friend Amanda. So, in spite of our rather bizarre topic today and the fact that you've got a hurricane in your general area, how are you?
I'm doing well. We're well north of anything dangerous right now.
Cool.
So all the buzz about landfall just a few moments ago. We have nice blustery wind and overcast, but the bigger concern for us later will be rain and wind that comes as it goes north. So we might have some trees down, power out, but flooding and real damage to structure, I think we're in the clear of that. So we're good.
I'm glad. And I didn't want anyone who knew that you were from Florida to think that I was using and abusing by having you on this discussion today. I'm not that cruel. Oh, but yes, I guess we just can't avoid this. I mean, human composting. Holy cow. I mean, this was presented as the next latest, greatest, bestest thing ever in human burial, an alternative to other methods. What was your gut reaction? Because human compost was literally in the headline. What went through your mind when you saw that? Uh-oh, Amanda, I think we did lose your video. There
So
you
sorry
are. You're
about
back in.
that.
Oh, it's okay. It's
I'm so
okay.
sorry.
Oh, it's all
Yes,
right.
my gut reaction was gross, ew,
Yeah.
repulsion. The idea of composting bodies didn't didn't bode well with me. I'll put it politely. But yeah, I mean, it got my mind reeling about, I mean, obviously it's California. I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked that they think
Mhm.
this is, tenable. But reading the article just confirmed everything that my gut said. Ew, from the headline, this is gross and bad and wrong.
I'm in pretty much the same boat. I saw that and I had that same initial revulsion. And the more I read, the more I was just noping out of the whole concept. And I know I'm laughing, but that is just the sound of the last of my brain's neurons exploding because I can't even, I don't know how this would even come up in someone's heart to do. It's weird. But for the benefit of those who have not yet read the article, I thought we could get into the gruesomeness of this process. Now, the article did say that methods varied, but the one they specified is that you have a vessel and the deceased is placed into this vessel. And this isn't like your traditional coffin. They did say it is reusable. These are reusable. So think about that. Then they surround the body with wood chips, alfalfa, straw, other stuff. Then it's aerated, whatever that means, enclosed. And then it's over the course of a few weeks, about 60 days or so, from what I understand, the body is consumed by bacteria and microbes, that which reduces it to a cubic yard of human soil. Then it's cured for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they give you back your soil. This was just legalized in California, but it's also legal in Washington, Colorado, Oregon, and Vermont. The only one of the usual suspects we're missing is New York, but I'm sure, I'm sure they won't be long before they add this to their to-do list as well. So before we get into what one of these CEOs for these human composting companies had to say, just from the description alone, where's your brain?
I want to know what aeration means. That is the
Uh,
one word that really stuck out to me, because to me, someone who lives in a limestone type of region where it's very sandy and things, to aerate soil means to poke a whole bunch of holes in it. or to dismember it in some way, to like dig it up and
Oh,
turn it over. And so I'm thinking, ha, that's weird, a weird phrase to use. It's aerated. And
yeah, because however that's done, that doesn't leave me with a good mental image. I mean, fancy doing that to grandma. Oh,
right, right. And then once, composting in itself is one of those it's a process. It's not like you just chuck it over to the compost pile and it does its thing. And microbes and bacteria are not the first step. That's you. I mean, they're present, but it's not the first step in decomposition. Um, so there's other things that happen with decomposition of anything, not just of flesh, but of biological material. So if you throw a banana peel out on the sidewalk, yes, the bacteria will begin to grow, but then there's also some other factors there, the climate, in which it was dropped, the animal activity in the area. There's certain things that happen to facilitate the decomposition naturally. So if they're doing this within a controlled area, like a box, even if it's filled with wood chips and straw, which I can only imagine just contains the smell,
oh
maybe
yeah.
the actual like release of fluids and gases, but you're sidestepping all of the other natural processes that have to go into natural decomposition. So you're going to have to artificially insert something else in there they're not mentioning because it's, taboo, I'm sure. So
Yes.
there's something nefarious feeling about the whole idea of, oh, it's just a magic process. Because
I am so
it's,
glad you bring this up because when I read the description, I thought, as grossed out as I am by this, it's still too sanitized. It's a little too clean and clinical and dispassionate for that to be all that there was to it. What really got my brain going is the idea of this reusable vessel. I mean,
mm,
obviously, I knew by the time I reached the end of the article that they would be giving your loved ones, your soil, which ew. But it's the idea that that container that was used to break you down is over and over and over, almost like a factory, you know,
yeah.
almost. Ugh. That bothers me, and I can actually that is what actually led to me sending you a message of just I have to get this out of my brain because I can't stop thinking about it. It really has bothered me that much.
Well,
So
yeah, there's a lot to be disturbed about, even if this was done, if this never goes widespread and this is done on a wide scale or small scale, that's still disturbing.
mhm.
This is a niche market, so to speak. I
Even if
think
it
it's,
is places like California, from
mhm,
people who we don't expect any better, it's still icky even for them. So that brings me to one of these companies. It's called Recompense. That it provides human composting. Their CEO is a woman named Katrina Spade or Kate Spade. They quoted her saying this process would provide an option that offers significant savings in carbon emissions and let's see, land usage over conventional burial or cremation. So, climate change, that's what it's about. That's the altar we're all kneeling at these days, apparently. And she also said that the method is cheaper than traditional burial or cremation. So I thought, isn't that interesting? You'll either hook people on the fact that this is just so virtuous that you're doing it this
mhm,
way, and it's less expensive. Isn't that great, everyone?
yeah,
Oh,
look at that.
I'm a little.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm a little disturbed by that. Just because, I mean, granted, I mean, I have not had to take the lead in any family funerals up to this point in my life, so I'm not as aware of all of the various expenses and what goes on to getting the final arrangements made. But I mean, I understand it's expensive, and I understand that there is a need, especially nowadays, to find economical alternatives that don't involve the family going bankrupt anytime someone dies. But the fact that it was paired with this whole, it's good for the climate and it's good for your wallet, it added another layer of icky. I mean, what did
Hmm.
you take? Are you kind of taking away the same thing from that?
Well, yes. I mean, I find it very ironic that, and we'll get, I'm sure, through the course of our discussion, we'll touch on the spiritual aspects of it later. But just as a precursor, they want both of each kind of world. So, in order to decompose or compost people in this way. It's almost atheistic worldview. Like all that matters is the material. We must save the planet because it's the only planet we have. So damn your body. That's you sacrifice yourself to the planet. And but on the other side of it, they're wanting to do this so that people can flourish, but if it's all material, then what does it matter? If they're waiting for the next step of evolution, then who cares what happens? That's the whole environmental thing. Is I don't they circular reason. We have to save the planet for the future generations, but the future generations are being told you're worthless by being
Yeah.
dumped like garbage after you
Yeah.
die. All you are is the material. Live for the now. So, which one do they want? That's the question that comes into my mind.
Well, I have
When we
another
start talking
question
about
that's
saving the planet.
I have another disturbing question. As I thought, it seems like something that would be ideal if you were needing to get rid. Oh God, even the way I have to phrase this, it sounds really callous. I hate having to say it this way, but if you needed to get rid of a lot of bodies very, very quickly, if you needed
Mm-hmm.
to have some more permanent disposal of them that didn't involve just tossing them in a pit and lighting a match, I mean, this sounds like the sort of thing you would do. And
It's the sort of thing we've done historically.
yeah,
Natural disasters in times of war, genocide. That's where you find mass graves. So, yuck.
well, considering how some of these people, because this isn't coming from the Republican side of the aisle. This isn't coming from
Mhm.
utilitarians libertarians or conservatives or constitutionalists or anything like that. This we know where this kind of thought is coming from, and it makes me wonder, oh, is that what they're planning for people like me once they get a little bolder and decide to really just remove us from the equation? I'm like, I don't wanna. I mean, in so many ways, I don't wanna.
Right. Yeah, I agree. There is a factor there to where they're wanting to erase us. I think,
Yeah.
not just us as conservatives or libertarians or people without an opinion, but people who value the immaterial, people who value life itself or individualism. It's all about the collective. You must do your duty, you must do your part. And if you're not wearing the badge, if you're not participating in our circus and bread lines, then what are you and who are you? And we don't care about you. And it's very blatant, if they're wanting, again, in this final stage of the life cycle, to take all the dignity and individualism from that.
Absolutely. And it's not like they're not already doing that to us while we're alive. I mean, with the corporatism and reducing to everything to just being a number and profit margins of loss or profit and all this other stuff. And just kind of this de-emphasizing the value and the worth of individual human life. I mean, which is why we have all these nasty ideologies. You can't actually accomplish anything under your own power. If you have anything, it's only because other people let you or because you're an oppressor. That's why you have something. And then, if they can't even leave you alone in death. you're dead. It's one less sinner on the planet from their perspective, and they can't even just let you rest in peace. They have to rot you, turn you into soil, and then I guess spread you in a cornfield. I'm not sure what the plan is. Oh, but that
Yeah.
Kate Spade person had an interesting quote. It was in 2014. She wrote a blog for the Huffington Post, and she said, "You might take solace in the fact that when you die, your days of pollution are over. So
Right.
it will release us from original sin, which I can only conclude original sin is existing because we've been told so many times our species is just this parasitic awfulness, which I can hear one of our group members already screaming, saying, "Humans serve a purpose in the natural world." And I want to say, Druid Fox, we love you, we know. If only we could convince these people of that. But I mean, as a Christian person, how do you take this kind of twisting of the idea of original sin, and I suppose even the idea of redemption? I mean,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it follows a theme of all the false religions. So any kind of cultish type of belief, this is exactly what that is. It's a new religion, and environmentalism is very pernicious that it falls under the umbrella of secularism. And so it's disguised, it's veiled, but it has all the hallmarks. It has all the players, it has all the same themes. And so, you have the whole process of, there's a savior, you're a sinner, this is the solution, and if you don't partake of it, then you're going to go down in history as just being this awful, rotten part of history. And that, it's good that you were exterminated. And,
yeah.
there's all kinds of things. And, the shunning that goes on when we're alive and the decisions that we make as far as being environmentally friendly, environmental justice, those kinds of things. Intermingling those words together is very problematic for anybody with what I would call a true religion,
Oh,
because it
absolutely,
does
it is.
it does pull from all of the different things and then makes excuses for the gaps.
Yeah.
Like if you believe in reincarnation, well, then what do you care about your body? If you believe in a bodily resurrection, then that's more problematic. But, they can explain that away and they can say, this or that or the other. And they have an answer for almost every argument, but the answer is illogical usually and sometimes incoherent. Like in this article, they try to tell you how good this is for the environment but they don't really ever tell you how this is going to better the planet or reduce carbon. It just says we're going to reduce carbon. We're going to reduce it this way or that way would be different than what we're just going to do it. Again, going back to that magical process.
Which, as someone who practices actual magic, it really irritates me when they do that. It's because I can at least explain what I do, how it works within natural law, and whether or not someone accepts that what I do is real. I mean, that's a whole separate question. But there's logic behind what I do. But it's just like, and we took the fairy dust and the bunny tails and we swirled our wands, and magically there was less carbon. And it just seems like we've been hit with this endless series of stuff of, well, this will reduce carbon. This reduces your environmental footprint. This helps you tread lightly on the planet. And I thought, okay, we have gone so far beyond the question of what constitutes good stewardship. No one's talking about just being tidy, pick up your trash. Can we dispose of trash in a better, more efficient way? No one's honest about the actual environmental cost of recycling plants. No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about the cost of mining for those electric batteries for the cars and everything else. They don't want to actually look at any of this stuff. But all of this stuff leads to, more damage to the planet, more damage to human beings. And I cannot get away from this idea of there's just so much hatred behind all of these measures just for the audacity of being part of the human species. I mean, is there another more cheerful way to look at this? Have I just got my doom glasses on?
I know. I don't, when I look at something like this, I only see the detriment that it will eventually do. It's not always on the surface and apparent, but there is a degradation to society when you devalue life itself at any stage. And so, from being born to dying, if at any stage you reduce the value of just being or existing, then you cause problems to human flourishing, because the obvious reaction is, well, then what the hell? Why do anything? So what? And
Well, yeah,
that's where
and
you
does
get
it?
the littering, you get the violence, you get the inhibition. All of that is bred from, what does it matter in the end anyway? Save the planet. But from
Yeah,
for who? For who? That's the
for
second
who?
part they don't say out loud.
Yeah, for who and for what purpose? And I think you're absolutely right that it does drive people to despair, and that explains a lot of the rather hideous conduct that we see. The way people will mutilate themselves, do all sorts of crazy stuff because they think it'll make them feel better, and then it doesn't, and then they're stuck. I think it explains. Oh, did you see the video of that Wawa that got ransacked?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it explains that behavior too, because clearly, if any of them thought that anything in life mattered at all, they wouldn't be acting like that. I was particularly taken back by one woman in the store who said, "So, are you going to make my sandwich, or are you just going to keep recording what they're doing?" As if
Like
this is just
business as
something normal to
usual.
accept. Yeah, I mean that was a pretty amazing statement to me. I mean, I'm all for keep calm and carry on, but that I don't think that's what it was. And the rather alarming rates of suicide, which have been going steadily up since COVID and lockdowns and all else. I mean, I think we are starting to see the fruition of what does any of it matter? I'm just gonna do whatever.
Right.
Oh,
I think that's from decades and decades. It started at the university levels, and even in the primary school on the upper level, so high school level, of telling children two different stories, telling them to love themselves and to be compassionate toward others, all these immaterial values, at the same time telling them that they're nothing more than meat machines, stardust, it's all material. We're going nowhere. We have no value. We're fizzing chemicals in motion. So you have those two juxtaposed worldviews battling it out in school. And then the world, we lean toward evil on, rather than good. And so, given the chance to raid a store and have a riot, what kid would be more, inhibited to do that? The kid who values tomorrow, the kid who values their family, not shaming themselves because they know they have a future. The kid who goes in there and causes all the ruckus is like, YOLO.
yeah.
And then
I mean, at
how
the
do you
very least,
harm?
if they, well,
Yeah,
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, because you're having to literally rebuild up human consciousness what it ought to be. It's like, okay, so I know that apparently all the adults in your family failed you, or you really failed them because you weren't paying attention. But here's a better way of being. And it's so much harder to undo damage than it is simply to raise people with a reasonable brain in their heads.
for
But
sure.
before we get too further off track, because I think we are going to ramble into how this ties into everything else. But I do want to draw attention to the picture that was provided at the article right at top. So if anyone's watching this, click on that article link and just look at that picture so you see what I'm talking about. They show you these reusable vessels. I thought they looked like chest freezers. Did you say that you thought they looked like?
They look like big file boxes, like they're nondescript, they're very utilitarian, just like you would put garbage in.
Yeah. Or you really, or like your tax returns of, oh, this is so boring. How many years before I can throw these out? Yeah, it is that kind of feeling. And I was noticing that there are holes drilled on the side. I presume for airflow and decomposition process. So I have serious questions about the stench of that room. But then
Mm,
I saw that there were two walls visible on that picture, and what seemed to be very heavy duty shelves, upon which these vessels were stacked on the shelves, just one on top of the other, which that really bugged me as well. And then
yes,
in the main part of the floor, there was an open vessel. The center was covered, concealing the deceased, assuming that they didn't have that just set up for a picture. But I mean, there could have been someone in there. It wasn't specified. And there was a little garland around the edge, but I was just looking at it and I thought, ugh, it's horrible
yeah,
to see that because apparently that's where you sit while you rot. Ew.
right. I mean, yeah, you have that and the warehouse aspect. What a wonderful
Yeah.
view of all the empty warehouses now that the supply chain's broken. You have all these massive places. What happens, that they're going to claim they're going to be able to create jobs. Again, this is not Amazon, folks. This is no regular warehouse. What kind of sanitation measures, protocols go into that? What is the actual process? Again, they're on shelves for ease of access, I would assume. And so there's going to be like a protocol there. I have experience with warehousing. You have to take inventory, you have to move things around, you have to categorize things. So what are the chances that even if this process gets set up, that through the mishaps of things, have you ever ordered something online and not gotten what you wanted? Imagine that on the human remains scale, where you get your little yard of dirt and you do something pleasant with it. And then in like 3 weeks, you get a phone call and says, oh, yeah, that really wasn't yours. We misshipped, or, it was mixed in with the one that was supposed to go to the mass grave. So you
Ugh.
got unknown family, people, whatever, in your yard now. I mean, you want to, the first thing that comes to mind is like, you want to stir up some ghosts? You, you want to, you just want everywhere to be haunted? Then that's a surefire way to get that going.
Yeah, that is the first thing I said to my husband because I think when I first read this article, there were a couple of commentary shows that did this, and when he came home from work, I was watching one of those, and he was making the same facial expressions we were. Was he was watching just ew and ick, and I turned to him and I said, "Honey, I know you would never do that to me. I know that, but just so the record is completely clear, I will haunt your ass if you do. And it's not going to be fun. I'm not going to be a good, sweet ghost if you do that to me." I mean, and
Well,
what you bring up is, okay, they gave you grandma's dirt. How do you know it's grandma? I mean, at least with cremation, I mean, they do that one person at a time. I mean, it's they know whose ashes belong where. So, and at the very least with cremation, there's something about that release of the fire. It puts me in mind of the legend of the phoenix. It came to its end, it burst into flames, and then it was reborn. And I think there's a really beautiful um, spiritual significance to that.
mhm.
Uh, I'm not getting that feeling with the dirt.
That-
I'm just sorry, I'm not getting that feeling. And just imagine what would funerals be like with this process? I mean, because so we bring in our filing cabinet or our chest freezer. That's this really glossy, shiny white on the outside. Does not look anything like the traditional coffin or urn that we're accustomed to. How do you handle that with the funeral home? I mean, that would be really weird.
yeah,
I mean, do,
I
do we
think the
gather in
idea
the warehouse?
I think they would want to eliminate the idea of a funeral, a wake, a memorial, any of that altogether. Because what's the
Oh,
point? Just have a party at your house. Nobody needed.
yeah, we'll put up a picture of grandma on the mantelpiece, and then we'll eat food, and I guess that'll be good enough. Ooh, 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 ooh. Yeah, you see, even if we don't get the wrong person buried in the flower bed, we're still gonna get ourselves haunted. Oh, and
Yes,
I meant to bring this up earlier with the sanitation, but I thought, okay, so we know that they have aeration and airflow issues with this whole process. So, in addition to the stink, well, that's going to be attracting all sorts of insects. That's going to attract all kinds of rodents and everything that goes along with that. And I thought, are we just kind of setting ourselves up for bubonic plague 2.0
yes,
or something equally nasty?
I agree. Yes, those necessary components for composting, that animal activity, that happens. And it must happen in order for the material to actually break down to soil. So microbes and bacteria, they do a good job, but they're slow. So they are not as efficient as the initial animal activity. So flies, rodents, scavengers, you have those that type of activity that is necessary for proper decomposition in nature. And that's true for plant life, animal life, even the unbiodegradable things. Again, animal activity, the second law of thermodynamics, everything breaks down. So even if you throw a paper cup into the woods, somebody's going to use it for something. So a bird may pick out the straw to put in its nest. A rat may build a nest within the cup until it starts to degrade, and then it will move on. And there's all these different parts to decomposition. So eventually, yes, it goes back to dirt, but it's a long process. It's not instant. It's not 3 weeks unless you artificially inject a component in there to make that happen. So you're talking about acids, you're talking about water, you're talking about, churning, doing that aeration again. So none
Let's
of
flip
that
that
happens.
law around.
Yeah, none of the hokey pokey doesn't sound like it's happening within this box. So there something there is a mess, is afoot. And how again will they prohibit that type of activity happening, in the warehouse? How are they going to keep rats out? How are they going to keep flies away? And if that is in fact part of their plan, then how do you keep the bubonic plague away?
Yeah.
So,
Or, and if not, bubonic plague, I mean, something that's just as legitimately dangerous. I mean, are we setting
yeah.
ourselves up for a really serious issue going forward? And I also thought about, well, what about criminal investigations? Because
Mm,
of course, sometimes people sadly die in very violent ways, and they're murder victims and all this other stuff, or the circumstances of their death are criminal. I mean, and this, you do have the same issue with cremation. It's not like you can later exhume the body and examine and take a second look and like, okay, what's really going on? But with this, it just seems like, I don't know, maybe it's just in my own internal revulsion talking, but it just seems like that would make it even worse. I mean,
yeah.
I'm just, yeah, you better make sure that if it's a criminal case, you get everything done that you could possibly need to do as thoroughly as possible. And, I'm looking at our institutions and I'm thinking, I don't think you're thorough. I don't think most of you are honest to begin with. And I think a lot of you are really vulnerable to pressure. So if someone's telling you, I need a certain result, and, your pension kind of relies upon me getting that result, I think there's a lot of people that slide right in line. And while I guess that isn't a different risk from what we would find in cremation, it's the ick factor again.
Okay. I think it's also a dividing line societally between the in crowd and the out crowd. And so if you're of the peasant class and you're just a plebe, no one's going to care whether or not you get justice because they obviously don't care what happens to you after your physical demise. Um, but people of importance, people of stature, people of note. I mean, I doubt celebrities are going to be, going to partake of this. If they do, it would be highly individualized. It will be celebrated. It will be, it will be very in a public way. So they're still getting the benefit of that respect, but there will be paid no respect to the general population, you know. So again, there's a dividing line there. You know, are we gonna do this to presidents? Are we gonna do this to returning soldiers? Or what will happen to places like Arlington? Will
Right.
Arlington be full and you're no longer eligible for a military burial? You know, there's all, I mean, San Diego, huge Navy town. They, you can still to this day be opted to be buried at sea. Will that then be eliminated from your benefit options? It'll be like, nope, it's compost or nothing. You signed up for the military. This is what we do. That's gross. You know,
It
there's all
is.
kinds of questions that come up societally that bother me as to, because we already know the rules are always for thee and not for me. So the people who are passing these laws and saying that this is going to save the planet, I can't help but think this is saving the planet for them at our expense.
Or they're trying to widen the power gap because everything they do, it makes it more difficult for us to attend to our own survival. The arrangements that they think will take care of our survival aren't going to cut it. And so it just puts us in this really perpetually vulnerable situation that does make it more likely that people pop off more regularly. And they are all concerned about overpopulation. So it's very difficult not to ascribe those kinds of motives to these people, or at the very least that they would see this kind of practice and think, "Aha, here's an opportunity. I'm down with that." Because I don't think all of them are masterminds by any means, but I do think a lot of them are some pretty crummy opportunists. So
Hmm.
the next question that formed in my mind is the soil of the recently deceased, is that different than the kind of soil to which we are accustomed? I mean, are we going to be able to look at the difference and be able to tell? And what about unclaimed bodies? Let's say someone who was homeless died and they composted them, or they couldn't be identified, so they composted them. Well, what do you do then? Are they going to start sending that soil to garden centers and just selling it really cheap and saying, "What a deal you're getting"?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, they did mention that in the article talking about, you could plant a tree with the remains of your loved one. Well, that's a private thing. But you're right. What do they do with the unknown or people who opt to donate their body to the collective? And so, will that end up in our farms? Will that end up in our Home Depots? The government will figure out a way to make money off of this, which again goes back to the whole, well, you're not supposed to sell human bodies. That's against the law. So are they then going to say, well, in this circumstance, it's okay? Or does that open the door to, well, if you want to sell your kidney, go ahead.
Well,
Or if you,
I could see both because I could see them saying, by this point it's soil. It's obviously not your loved one, so what's the big deal? And then they could also open the door. But I mean, really, because we're such freedom-loving people, you should have the right to decide to sell whatever, in whatever fashion, at whatever stage, for any reason that passes through your head. I could definitely see them going both ways with that. I mean, whatever
yeah,
flew. So
yeah.
let's say you get grandma's soil and you put it somewhere. Maybe you use it to plant her a tree or what have you. Is this actually laying the dead to rest?
I, one of those questions where it's like, well, technically, yes, and but realistically, spiritually, I don't think so. I think that even if the person themselves, the deceased, may be at rest, I don't think that the living would be at rest. I think that in the end they would regret the decision. And then once the decision is made, either by that generation or the following generation, because there's no place to go, there's no place to visit, there's no memorial, there's no nothing, that they would eventually be like, oh, I don't think that was smart. Because what happens, like right now, we have a hurricane. So let's say everybody in Florida is being composted and planted as trees. We are right now preparing for all of those trees to come down. Then what? You go and replant another? In the event of a flood, does that soil get washed away? Then what? So there's tricky business when you talk about
Yeah.
being laid to rest at a resting place. The dead person doesn't care, but that is all part for the living. And
As far
generationally
as we
speaking,
know. As far as
right?
we know.
Yes, yes, they can care to an extent. Let's put it that way. As I don't know that they can do much about it other than complain, the deceased. But
Oh no,
we have to recognize that things like funerals and headstones and memorials and
yeah,
statues and
it is
benches
for
and all those,
us.
that's for the living, so that there is a place that the living can gather and remember. But if that gets washed away, so to speak, or literally, then what? How do you explain to the great great grandchildren that there's no place for them? The historic family plots, cemeteries, things like that. I mean, my husband and I still visit old family cemeteries when we're in the vicinity. We do it so that our children know this is where your ancestors are buried. This is the town they lived in. This is where they died. We can remember the stories. I think all of that goes away when you just dispose of people again like garbage. And it's like, it's all material. Forget it.
I was thinking about how much the equation changes when we don't have headstones anymore. Because even
Mhm,
in the case of cremation, you can still erect a headstone. I mean, and if you
mhm.
want to bury the ashes, you certainly can, but at the very least, you can have a headstone. Could this practice, if it became widespread, would that just be the end of cemeteries? I mean, I think maybe it could be. And
They did talk
some of
about
the
land conservation, so I do think that that is the idea.
which that's a horrifying idea because cemeteries are absolutely part of our history, whether it's, well-known, very historic cemeteries where you had proper artists doing some amazing things with headstones and other memorial markers, but also to just kind of your plain country. This is where the farmer Browns and all of his family were buried. Just the fact that they were there and it's a place of remembrance. You take that away. I mean, that just seems like one more encroachment, honestly, of Marxism because it wants this divorce from the past. The past never happened. Wipe it away. You don't need it. The only thing that exists is the now. And I think this is a really advanced stage of that kind of thinking.
Yeah, it's going to put archaeologists out of business.
Yeah.
I mean, they spend their entire lives uncovering the past with great care, I might add. They're not in there ransacking the tombs. They're meticulously going through, even if all they find are bones. They want to know, were they male? Were they female? Were they tall, short? What maybe did they eat? Is there evidence of their lifestyle based on their remains? And if we take that away, let's say there is some kind of cataclysmic event where society needs to reboot, so to speak, how will future generations interpret the past? They won't be able to.
Well, and that makes me really wonder. One of my husband's theories is that he thinks that technological human progression is something that tends to rise and fall. And he thinks that it's very possible in the past we had technology that equals our own, perhaps even exceeds it. But of course, with this kind of technology, it's very ephemeral. A few centuries go by and all trace of it disappears. The only thing
Mm.
that really remains are, structures of stone, things that have really made an impact. The ancient burial mounds. There's a reason why every single ancient culture always did this kind of thing. There was reverence, even if it wasn't for the dead themselves. Certainly reverence for their lives and what it meant. And I mean, I know in certain pagan societies there would be times of the year when you would essentially make offerings at these burial mounds and for the deceased, to try to contact your ancestors to show your respect to them. I mean, the modern day Mexican festival of the Day of the Dead, that's that same kind of impulse. We're remembering our ancestors. We are gathering them together. We are still their family members. And without some kind of something along those lines, I mean, what is there to tether us to the past? I mean, and how can we possibly chart our future, because we don't have any roots at that point?
Correct. Yeah, I agree. I think it's the same theme, in Christianity again. Um, that there's a reverence to the past, to honoring those who come before us. You know, we look at figures from the Bible. How many people are actively looking out, for remnants of their existence, of, not necessarily trying to prove a spiritual point, but just a historical point. This battleground actually existed, this person actually existed, and they get very excited when they find it. And
Well,
if
and
you
for
take
good
away that
reason.
away, how do we trace, like Leif Erikson is a
Mhm.
prime example, right? We know certain things about him because of what was written, the traditions going forward and tales of his adventures and things like that. But the evidence is what corroborates that, and then makes him an important figure in that heritage. Um, and then if you erase the final memory, then who knows that was, who cares whether it was his landing site, they found a artifact of his that he went here before anybody else did. It all doesn't make any kind of sense or connection, to investigate. So again, the whole anthropology industry, archeology, understanding past, learning from the past, all of
Absolutely.
that goes away, all of it. And I think that might be a move for all of us to try to live in the new digital world even more. It's like, oh, you want to preserve your legacy, preserve it digitally because that's where it's going. But again, we're trying to save the planet for
Yeah.
the live in the digital world. It's two separate ideas, and that's why there's so much confusion, and these things get passed under the rug and under the radar. Nobody seems to understand the ramifications at the time because they are busy living their narcissistic meta life.
Yeah. And just as a side note, no one seems to be asking about the carbon footprint of big tech, because all the servers, everything that it takes to make the internet and do all these platforms and everything else, I'm telling you, that is leaving a mark on the planet, just so everybody's aware on that. And, and I keep going back to what we've been talking about, this deliberate destruction of the past, of not allowing us to have a formation of the past. It's because we know how in politics, if they don't want us to remember something, with the cooperation of the media, things just get kind of, you know, shuffled off to one side and no one remembers anything. Imagine doing that with the whole civilization. And then someone says, I don't really like this overbearing government. I don't like being constantly told what to do. I feel so micromanaged and constricted. Well, if you don't have any knowledge of your past, then you don't have a leg to stand on when you say it used to be different, it could be different again. Someone can say, well, it's always been this way. And as far as they know, they might be telling you the truth as they know it. As far as you know, that could be all that there ever was. I mean, just imagine trying to get to the psychological and the philosophical development to say no, people should be free just by virtue of being human beings. We should not be this micromanaged and controlled. I mean, that's many centuries, if not millennia's length of task. So I mean,
Mm,
I know we are linking together a lot of chains on this line of thought, but I do think that it is all interconnected. That this is all kind of this whole humans are worthless, why remember them kind of thing.
yeah.
So I think we're pretty much in agreement that the composting business is no bueno. But for people who might be interested in a more natural style of burial, I mean, let's try to redeem the idea for them. I mean, if someone just said, I just want to do something that my ancestors would have recognized, something simple, something that doesn't involve the chemicals, what would you suggest for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of options. I mean, you have to check with your local state laws and things like that, but most have religious exemptions against embalming or, having to be buried in an actual cemetery. If you have a private piece of land, there can be exceptions made there. There is cremation. There is, you can still do again on private lands, which I find to be more important now than ever. If on private lands you can be just straight put in the ground, you don't even need the accoutrements that the funeral homes try to pitch you now with like a cement liner and the things like that. um there's also the idea of, even if you go for some of those things like a traditional coffin or things like that, that bringing back family cemeteries would be, something that, where you're not put in the city plot where you are at the mercy. I mean, we've heard some horror stories in our lifetimes of people not doing what they said they were going to do anyway. So we know it's possible, like they're throwing bodies out the back door and eventually they're making it into the ground. So we know that we can skip some of the steps. They're not all necessary. You can do, you know, um, you can even bring back, the idea of mausoleums. Those have kind of fallen out of favor because they're big and bulky. But again, you can reuse, so to speak. You could put more than one person in a mausoleum. That's a very traditional type of thing. If it's a private family um type of thing, we heard about that briefly with Queen Elizabeth II recently. She's now entombed with her husband and her ancestors, so that's a catacomb type of situation. So that would even be more natural in my idea than this composting business.
Oh, I agree. I think one thing that could be done, which I'm not sure of the legality, so of course, as you just said, everyone check their locals to see what the government allows you to do, and if they don't allow you to do things, maybe it's time to replace people in the government.
That's right.
but but I was thinking, what about just the return, for simple burials of of a plain wooden box, nothing
Hmm.
ridiculous about it. I mean, maybe if someone wanted to do some special carving on it, but just have a box, not this weird stuff. Put you in, and maybe. I mean, I think it would be a very pagany thing to actually have some meaningful herbs and so on. Maybe things that were very special to you. My favorite tree is the weeping willow tree. So if I were to be buried, bury me maybe with some branches of the weeping willow tree and some herbs that are associated with the afterlife and all that good stuff. I mean, you could do some things, just put them quietly, unembalmed, into the ground, put your marker, and I feel like that would be much more likely to result in a sense of someone being at peace. I
Hmm.
mean, and of course you would eventually return to the ground, and that's fine. I'm not bothered by the decomposition process. I know throughout the discussion that might it is the manner in which it is achieved. I think it is fine for the dead to lay in the ground, or to be cremated and then have their ashes put in the ground and to become one with the earth that way. But it's reverence and respect. It's about going through whatever's the customary ceremonies for people, whether it's your own personal family or your religion or what have you, of just going through those emotions and allowing people the ways to grieve to which they are accustomed, so that they can show respect, and just letting letting that tradition continue, because I am so tired of so many traditions being destroyed for no other reason of, well, I don't feel like doing those things, so I'm not going to participate in them. I'm thinking, when we talk about traditions and anything our culture is built up, that was evolved over a process of centuries and centuries. And
Mm.
it's something that I don't think a lot of people would have the capability of reinventing. And they're certainly not offering improvements as alternatives. And I just keep thinking, by what right do you tear down what you could never possibly build? I don't know. Maybe that's just my cranky brain talking, but
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, again, you have the whole connection to a past, um, and having a marker, a place that you can remember. We need those type of visual landmarks so that even strangers passing by, I mean, even if you don't know a soul in a graveyard, there's still decorum within a cemetery that we observe. And you don't go have a birthday party. And then what will happen to the existing cemeteries if they fall out of fashion? Will they repurpose those grounds and build condos again? Going back to the ghost factor, have we not learned from anything? You do not build on burial ground. But I can see that happen.
asking for trouble.
Yes. So, again, it's like one of those, I can see down the road their little devious wheels turning. They're like, oh yeah, that big cemetery, that's prime real estate. We could put up so much affordable housing, or the greatest, latest connector loop, an airport or whatever, parking lot. And that in itself is a degradation of the past, because it's a retrograde assault on what is already established tradition,
I
in place of
agree.
the new. We got to save the climate, so therefore we have to dig up everything and replace it so that nobody has any idea that it is any different.
I mean, this goes beyond, anything that any conquering culture or conquering religion ever even attempted to do. I mean, we're both aware of the, things that did not go well when Christianity and paganism met up for the first time. But even under those circumstances, there was not as much destroyed, there was not as much repurposed as what we are seeing done on this scale, and potentially on this scale. I mean, I don't think that anything comes close to what comes out of this Marxist, collectivist, authoritarian kind of mindset of everything's a blank slate, and if we don't like it, well, we'll just tear it down, and who's to stop me? And it's just, these are civilization destroyers. I mean,
Yeah.
not just no respect for the dead, not just why can't we just do something nice for the one last time for a dead person? Just absolute civilization destroyers.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it is they're trying to equalize everyone in this manner to overstate that nothing and none of us do actually matter, is the message that really comes across. It's the subliminal message, is that none of this matters. You don't matter. I don't matter. In 100 years, no one's going to even know that you existed, unless someone cares enough to tell your story to their children, and their children tell it to your children, and that kind of a thing. But again, unless you're a person of note, how many relatives do you not know anything about?
Quite a
But
few. I mean,
yeah.
that's just the reality of it. And also,
Mm.
I mean, there are also other signs in our society that's trying to make people much more anonymous and interchangeable. I mean, this whole gender confusion, I think that's one manifestation of it. But I think also kind of the push for minimalism in design and brutalism in architecture that has that. So you're just temporary. Why would we make something nice for you? Oh, you're just temporary. Why would you actually live here? Why would there be signs of your interest? It's not important enough. I mean, and this is why we see so many people, even on these, little decorating. I follow every trend like a seal kind of shows that we see on YouTube. And, and all their walls are the same color and they shop at all the same stores and they're doing all the same things and they're saying all the same words. And it just reinforces this whole, oh, you have no personality, and sometimes even these poor ladies look very similar, you know, they have the same kind of hair, same hair color, they have the same accent. I call it, there's one of two accents for the YouTube decorator. It's either someone who does the up talk, where everything ends in a question, or it's in the most backwoods hillbilly, and we're just gonna talk like this because it's so homey. I mean, that's one of the two. Those are the only two accents that are apparently allowed, and it just reinforces this whole anonymous, bland, homogenized, no individuality. And
Yeah.
it sounds so silly and petty to pick on that. I know, but when I look at all the things together, I'm saying there are so many things trying to tell people that they don't amount to anything. And it's
Right.
just, I mean, at this point, it just doesn't seem small anymore. It just seems like, oh, look, someone had the same really nasty idea, and this is just how that idea grew in this particular soil.
Right.
Oh, how very, very gloomy.
Right. Those two different ideas, again, from the beginning, it's like you cannot have it both ways. So there's either an immaterial life, something out there in the ethos, or there isn't. And you can't treat people like there isn't, but then tell them that there is. You, those two things won't mesh together because either the person is going to believe what you say and buck you on the material side of things and say, you're not composting me, or they're going to believe what you do and disregard what you say, therefore making you a liar. And then they become destructive in their own right because they're frustrated and it's all futile at that point. So who cares if they stab the random guy on the subway or
I
kill
mean, it
their own
doesn't.
children or anything that we think is horrific now? How long before it's like, yep, that's how it goes. You're just dirt. Go be dirt now.
I think that all ties in together beautifully, and it does explain why people are doing the extreme things that they are doing. Because I mean, what's to say that any of it does matter? And they've already been trained not to think logically. This emotional supremacy. I've been harping on this subject more and more over the past few months, and I think it's really important. And people really need to start pulling themselves together because emotions are always reactive. And if they aren't reacting to your logical, analytical thought process, then they're going to be reacting to external stimuli and all of the messages from that external stimuli. And
Mm-hmm.
now we know why the world is the way that it is. Human
Right.
composting is a symptom of a larger problem.
Yeah, I believe it is. I think it's a manifestation of an assault on life itself, existence. We are bad, like you said at the beginning, for just existing. We should have never been placed here, and we need to do everything we can to minimize our existence. For what? That's the question though. We got to minimize our existence and save it, but for what? You know, um, I don't know the answer to that, which I don't think they do either. I think they're grasping at straws. They don't. It's a non-logical or an illogical thought pattern, to say, well, there must be something beyond us, but we don't know what it is. So we're going to act like there isn't. And then we're going to, what do you do with the emotions? Like you said, anger, fear, happiness, joy, all of these things that we feel and no one can explain. And so you act out and you try different things like this. These are the outcroppings, these ideas of, well, let's just test this whole material issue. Is it a psychological test? I wouldn't put it past them.
I mean,
You
it
know?
wouldn't. me. I mean, and it could even be more simple than that because I think some of these people, they're not particularly deep thinkers. I think you and I could give them a run for their money, some of these people. I think a lot of
Mhm.
them, it doesn't go much beyond if, they want to have, their estate, they want to have, their feudal lands, and they want to have just enough servants to keep the castle clean and to make sure things are still growing in the fields. And they're not really interested in having superfluous beyond that. And I think whatever eventually gets them there, I think they're okay with. I think there's a reason why so many of the elites are pushing for and doing incredibly destabilizing things because and why they're working so hard to divide people because you can't have people uniting and saying we've had just about enough of you and we're going to take you to jail now, and that's just what's going to happen. I mean, they don't want that scenario, and I think they know that if they don't absolutely get the leash on now, that is their ultimate destination. A lot of these elites, I think they are just aware enough to know that, and they don't want that. They just want to have their nice estate. They want their castle, and they want other people take care of the necessary business, and they just want to reap the rewards. It's for some of them, I
Oh,
think it really is just that simple.
I do agree. I think that, a lot of it is motivated by trying to eliminate the competition. And they don't, they understand that it is a pyramid and they feel as if they're on top. And to stay on top, you must then, keep everyone underneath you. And if you can make the pyramid smaller, it's easier to stabilize the top. So,
Yeah.
if you have a whole mass of people that you can eliminate from the equation altogether, and by dehumanizing them or demoralizing them, then you can make your world a little smaller and your kingdom a little richer because those who do get let in, they're grateful for the opportunity to lick your boots, to sweep your floor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh,
No,
I think some of them are envisioning the bows and curtsies already. Oh, so I think we've laid out the case for why human composting sucks and why the mindset that created it also sucks. But I don't want to leave people on a downer note. So, what? How can we encourage the people? Because I feel like we should. We should always try to encourage them at the end.
the easiest thing that we must remember is that we have the ultimate superpower of no. No stops it in its tracks. When you say no individually, then and everyone will, again, catch on to that idea. As long as choice is alive, then we have a chance. You may go down a martyr. They may still kill you. They may still compost you, but it will be known that you said no, that you went unwillingly into the night. And that is the most important thing that we have as a frontline tool for diplomacy, is to tell people when we talk to them about these things and these types of you know topics get brought up in friendly discussions. Just say that is abhorrent. Be plain. Just say I am absolutely against that, and for here's the reasons why. And then that will plant those seeds and keep that choice alive, no matter how small. We may only end up with a remnant, but it's a remnant. It's not total destruction. So there's hope. Just say no. Nancy Reagan, just say no.
In a slightly different context than she originally had in mind, but the premise certainly holds true. The only thing I would add on to that is that everything you see being attacked, everything you see trying to be destroyed, lean into those traditions, whether it is cherished holidays or, the way some silly decoration that you always put on your Christmas tree that doesn't mean anything else to anybody, but it means a lot to your family. I don't care how it doesn't go with the theme of the rest of your tree. Put it on there. Use your good dishes. I mean, do everything you possibly can to enrich your life and to be a benefit to yourself and your family. and lean into all the things. If they don't want you to think, think. If they're telling you not to feel, that is definitely the time to be feeling and showing compassion and empathy. And just it's almost at the point of do the opposite of what the powers that be are trying to tell you, because they're not interested in whether you live or die. They're just
Nope.
trying to make you useful to them. So make yourself not useful, spread that around. Remember, we've got all the toys, we've got the fun stuff. People do enjoy traditions. We enjoy seeing, how people decorate for the holidays. We enjoy the foods that we prepare. We enjoy the fact that we can gather around a fire and just be human with other people. Keep that alive, because that's also another way of just telling them no.
Yes. Yeah. All of that to ultimate human flourishing, which to me is the goal. That is the goal. Whatever is good for human flourishing above everything else, I am for it. So if natural burial is better for the environment than embalming and trying to keep people intact longer, great. I'm for that. I'm for deregulation. Everybody get your choice, do your thing, private land, private understanding. And if we can hang on to that and those traditions, then we're better off, even in the short term. Even if we ultimately, again, lose some along the way, then we're still better off than if we just sign off now and say whatever. We should be speaking out against California's practices and imploring people to stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah. Listen to your instincts for once. If something feels icky, it probably is. Not everything has to be normalized. Some things aren't normal for a reason. And composting human beings is definitely on the list for me.
Yes,
Well,
don't be
okay.
a little judgy.
Yeah. Ugh, judgment needs to come back into fashion, that's for sure. Alrighty, well, thank you for joining me, Amanda. Thank you for everyone who hung out with us throughout the entire episode. I hope you've been hanging out with me. I've been, whenever these episodes post, I try to hang out in the voice chat to interact with people there. Leave us a comment. Come see us on Gilded if you want to continue this conversation. You'd be very welcome there. So I guess that's it. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.